All right, I'm going to start up. Hope everybody had a nice holiday. Um, Today we're going over one last form example, and I've given you a hard copy of it. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes on it. I mean literally just a couple minutes. And a couple people had asked and had questions about the last lab, number 5-5. So I was going to go over that one also. And hopefully we can get that done by 9 o'clock. Now, if you weren't aware of it, the Chapter 5 exercises were due a week ago. And some of you turned them in and some of you haven't. And today, the Chapter 5 homework is due. So I want to make sure you've got time to work on that today. Like I said, ideally 3 hours, if not more. All right. And tomorrow then is the written test when you come in for Chapter 6. The rest of the period will be lab. Wednesday is the hands-on for Chapters 5 and 6. Thursday, Chapter 7 lecture and a test review. Friday, we're going to do actually two things. It's the object-oriented program examples, but remember at 8:30, Shannon Bruggeman is going to come in here to do the course evaluations with you, and that's your chance to talk to her about whatever. And then next week, if you notice, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we've got stuff every day. But then now, next Friday and then the following week, so you're going to have, again, 7 class periods to be working on that portfolio. All right. So as far as what I just handed out to you, and it is by no means perfect, it's a work in progress, for lack of better words. If I bring it up like here on here right now, what it looks like is just like the other one I showed you the other day. And notice if I click check form, comes up and it says all those fields are required. Okay, so I want to go over that with you in just a second. And if I come in here and just type in, I'm just going to type in a 1 for a bunch of stuff here. And you can see that virtually everything that's in here, putting a 1 in for it wouldn't be a right thing to do. So you'll notice if I click check form, what it changes to. The address, I just said it had to be something in there. But social security number tells the format. First name, last name, and city, I said we're alpha only. I just kept it simple. Zip code had to be in one of these two types of formats. Username between 6 and 8 characters in length. Illegally formatted email address, that actually was a valid age because the age was 1 through 125. So notice if I change that to 126 and click, I do get age must be between 1 and 125. Phone number must be in one of these formats. Birth date must be in the right kind of format. So you'll notice as I start filling stuff in here, and this one, there was still some kind of problem with it, so this one might still show as a problem. What's the date? The 28th. All right. So you'll notice I just set it up with a get, so all the information is shown up here. Again, it's not perfect. It is very far from being perfect. But what I wanted to show you is basically the way that this was set up was I set up a bunch more constants in here. All right, required, just the word required. Then every one of these starts with a U for user, user social security number, user alpha, user zip code, username, user email, user age, user phone, and user birth date. All right, so that was all different things that I would put in for error conditions. As we've seen before, I set this up, but notice the other thing that I did here, I set it up that I trimmed each one of these. So if you did come in there and you put in blank spaces, only blank spaces, it would trim those out. Remember, trim removes leading spaces and blank spaces. So for instance, if a person, their last name is O'Hara, and let's say it's an O with an apostrophe, then space H-A-R-A, trim won't remove that space. It only removes spaces at the beginning and spaces at the end. All right, previously I'd written my own trim function, but I used the one that now exists in JavaScript. I also have a flag in here that I just called all valid. And I assume that what you're going to put in there is valid. But every time I find something that's invalid, I set that all valid flag to false. So it's possible this all valid flag could be set all sorts of times, but I don't care. All right. So what I'm doing in here for each one of these, for all these required, there's a bunch of them. And all I'm doing in that required thing is I'm saying, if the field that you pushed in after we trimmed it is equal to double or single quote, and I could have used double quote. So if it's the empty string, return false. All right. Otherwise, return true. Now that should make sense to all of you by now. All right. So then we've got the validation for the social security number. I showed you this the other day. 3 digits, a hyphen, 2 digits, a hyphen, 4 digits. If it matches that pattern, return true. Otherwise, return false. All right. The alpha, which said, and I decided to allow you to put a blank space in there. Now that is a little bit hinky, because what I can actually put in is, like, I could put in for a name, I could put in a bunch of letters, then a bunch of spaces, then a bunch more letters. But I still, if I just put in a blank in here, even though that's valid in here, trim is still going to remove that. All right, so I said if you match that pattern, return true, otherwise return false. Zip code, what I showed you the other day, either 5 digits or 5 digits followed by an optional hyphen and 4 digits. If you match that, return true, otherwise return false. The username was pretty simple. All right. If the length is greater than or equal to 6 and it's less than or equal to 8, return true. Now, a couple of you still had problems with this the other day, so I just wanted to show you one thing. I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to copy this and put it in here again, and I'm going to remove it in just a minute, but I want to show you this. If we didn't want to say this, this says if it's greater than or equal to 6 and it's less than or equal to 8, return true. What we could have said was if it's less than 6 or it's greater than 8, return false. Otherwise, return true. Now, does that make sense? Because some of you are kind of continually mixing this up. You will be asked to do this on at least one problem on the hands-on test, to do something like this. So if you want it inclusive, you use and. If you want it exclusive, meaning stuff that doesn't meet it, and that's or. All right? Does that, again, ask if you have questions, because you will be expected to do something like that on your test. It doesn't matter which one you use. All right? You use the one that makes the most sense to you. To me, the one that made the most sense was doing it this way. You may not agree with that, and that's okay. All right? Again, this was that pattern. This is all the stuff I showed you the other day. This was the age. And again, just so you see this thing for the age right here that you see right there, that could also have been written if age is less than min age or age is greater than max age, return false, else return true. Now, a couple of you, when you did the test, at least the first version of the test, you put in only a single ampersand or a single one of these. That won't work. It actually does work to a point, but what happens is if you use just a single one of these, It's telling it that rather than compare the whole thing, it's telling it to compare it bit by bit. You don't want to do that. Just take my word for it. All right? The only way you'd want to do something like that is if you were a systems programmer and you were programming an operating system or a compiler or something like that. All right? But other than that, there really is virtually never a reason to do that. All right. Phone number, same thing. Again, there's that or sign that's in there. So that says 3 digits, a hyphen, 3 digits, a hyphen, 4 digits, or parenthesis, 3 digits, parenthesis, space, 3 digits, and I think I left that out again, hyphen, 4 digits. All right. The birth date, this again appeared to be a little hinky. I'm not sure it totally worked. But the idea is, do you understand what's going on in there? What you're going to be asked to do isn't going to be that. I'm not going to give you that many things. But there's 2 problems on the test. All right. With one of them, it's a form, and you are going to have to do validation. So I would strongly suggest, if you're still confused, either ask or at least go and try to look through the validation examples that were in the chapter. All right? All right. The other thing was this number 55. What this is supposed to look like, and again, some of you have turned it in already, so I guess you've gotten it, but what that one is supposed to look like when you run it is it's supposed to look like this. These are sometimes referred to as jumps. So in other words, if I go to Amendment 10, it jumps to Amendment 10. You say, no, it didn't. Well, that's the bottom of the page. That's as much as it can jump to. All right? And if I go to Amendment 6, you'll see how that jumps to Amendment 6. All right? And the way that you were supposed to do that, according to our instructions, is we were told first in the text editor, open up the file. All right, so right now what it looks like is this. In other words, there's no jumps. There's nothing in there. There's just this, just the amendments themselves. That was all that was in there. All right? So we're told that the first thing that we're supposed to do in here, as always, is to come in, put your name, put in the date and do all that good stuff. All right? And then it says that we're supposed to come in and just before the closing body tag, add a script element. All right? By now, I think that you should be pretty familiar with this. Again, I like to add both the beginning one and the end one as we're getting in here, okay? Then next, it said, declare a variable named list that contains a reference to the only UL element in the document. Also declare empty variables named heading text and TOC entry, I guess it was. So for those, we're going to make 3 variables, var list, and that's going to be equal to document dot, I don't want to, and that was a query selector. There's other ways this could have been done. All right, UL, and doing that, again, that UL could have been in uppercase or lowercase. It doesn't matter. All right, and then we were supposed to have 2 blank variables, one called heading text, I think it was, and the other one called TOC entry. All right. Now, the way the author names variables is not at all the way I name variables. I was taught not to use some of the things that the author does, but it doesn't really matter. All right. So for lack of better words, when it says that it's a reference, what most programming languages refer to is this is called a pointer. So right now you're pointing to the beginning of that unordered list. All right. So we did step 1, we did step 2, we did step 3. All right, step 4. Below the variable declarations, create a for statement that sets a counter variable equal to 1, repeats as long as the value of the counter variable is less than 10, and increments the counter variable by 1 each time through the loop. Well, you all know how to do that. That's just saying set up a for loop that's going to go from 1 to 10. Now, you might say, well, why do they go from 1 to 10 instead of 0 to 9? My guess is because the amendments go from 1 to 10, and that's why they did it that way. Again, not being the author, You know, I can't always tell you. I just tell you what I think probably the author's mindset was. All right. So then after that, in here, for var, and again, we can call this whatever we want. I tend to call it LCV. You can call it I, J, K, etc. This is, again, considered the only time that it's considered permissible to call your variable something like I, J, K, or whatever. Now, I'm not asking, I guess for lack of better words, I'm telling, that line of code in line 189 there, that should make sense to each and every one of you. By now, that really should. All right, that's all we're saying in here is we're setting up a loop, something that's going to loop through 10 times. All right? Yes.
Don't you have to have that in a function?
Don't we have to have that in a function? Yeah, I think we were supposed to write a function, weren't we? Okay. Thank you. So let's put all this, we'll wrap all this into a function. And I think it's called create talk. So let me move all that over, thank you. All right. But again, everything that's in there by now should make sense to you. All right. And again, I wouldn't have done it like this, these entries and the like, but they're going to be putting in strings, it looks like, so I would have done this. I would have said equals that, but even if you don't, again, because of the fact that this is such a forgiving language, it still works just fine. All right? Now, what you're going to find next semester is if you do something like that, if you just start using a variable without giving an initial value, like if you try to print out, you're going to get an error. If I try to print out right now, heading text or talk entry, I'll probably get undefined. That's another place where JavaScript is really liberal and it allows you to do things where other programming languages don't allow you to do that. If you try to print them out, you're just going to get an error message. The program's going to, for lack of better words, crap out right there. All right? Okay, so what else are we supposed to do in here? All right, so we're up to step 5, which looks like it's pretty much most everything else we've got to do. Within the for loop, add, that should be an S, add statements that perform the following tasks. Set the value of the heading text variable to the content of the element with an ID equal to that of the current value of the counter variable. All right, so the heading text, when you're at the first amendment, should be saying amendment 1 type of an idea. That's what they're saying. So we're building that jump list that's going to be hyperlinked. All right, then we're going to create a new li element and assign it as the value to the TOC variable. And then we're going to add that new element, basically, we're going to add it in. All right, as the last child. So in other words, like I said to you before, what we want when we get done is instead of having it look like this, oh, wherever I had it, we want it to look like this. So this is what you're doing in the for loop, is you're putting in the stuff that's right here. Not only do you have to put it in there, but you have to let the system know what, since it's hyperlinked, what those hyperlinks are connected to. Okay? So I'm just going to throw the code in here right now. It's not that much code. It's what? 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. All right? So I said heading text is equal to document.get element by ID I.inner HTML. We'll go over all of them in just a minute. Talk entry. Oops. Thank you. right? There's still one more thing we have to do, but that's outside of the function, okay? So what we want to do, the heading text, it's document.getElementById inner HTML. So that'll be that amendment, you know, Roman numeral 1, amendment, Roman numeral 2, etc. All right? Then, and that's spelled wrong too, we want to create a new list item right here. That's the talk entry. And we want to take that entry and we want to fill up its inner HTML with what we just set up there for that heading text. So again, as we run through this, the first time that you run through it, it's going to add amendment 1. So what it's doing is it's grabbing each one of these. Does that make sense? It's grabbing each one of those things you see there in the blue, and it's using that. So it's grabbing this, and it's filling in that one, this, and it's filling in that one, etc. So that's all it's doing. Now, is that easy? No. That's why I had said, you know, earlier in the class that we go through some of these as a class. We haven't been going through that many because, by and large, people have been getting them done without too much trouble. All right. But is what's going on there makes sense? Yes.
You have a pen chili instead of a pen child.
Thank you. All right. Now, the only other thing that we're told to do at the end here says create a backward compatible event listener that calls the create TOC function when the page finishes loading. Okay. So that means outside of the function, we've got the if window.add event listener. So that's the first part. That'll handle 99.9% of your cases. But again, if somebody has an old version of IE, then we need that else. Because instead of using the add event listener, we have to use the window dot attach event. And it's on load, whoops, sorry, instead of load. And it's the create talk. That should be everything. All right. Let's just run it one time and make sure that it works, that I didn't screw up any other thing that we typed in. All right, so that's there. And I am moving. So it all appears to work. All right. Now, it's funny, I mean, again, there are a lot of things I like about this book, and there's things I don't like about this book. All right, I think the book does a good job of showing you how to do a lot of things that you would do as a web programmer, but sometimes it does those things, and it doesn't really go into and do a very good job of explaining some of this stuff in more general. All right, so I've tried to fill in those gaps, so to speak. Are there any questions on that one? Because again, that's all I had. So please, especially if you're behind, try to take the rest of the period today. All right, and finish up the exercises for chapter 5. Okay? And I think the ones for chapter 6 are due, like one's due at the end of this week and the other one's next Monday or something like that. I don't remember. We can look at that too. All right. And I know, again, you've got plenty of stuff to do. And Charles came in this morning and said, well, 3 more weeks in a day. Yeah, so there's not that much time left. The good news is out of those 16 class periods, again, 7 of them are going to be lab, the last 7, for you to come in here and like I said, I want you to blow me away with the job that you do on those portfolios. All right, remember when you come in here tomorrow that the first thing that we're going to do is the written test, okay? And the rest of the period will be lab. So if for some reason, you don't finish up this chapter 5 stuff, then finish it up tomorrow. And if you do finish it up, then start on the chapter 6 stuff. Try to get a little ahead as opposed to being behind. Question? Pardon me?
There's no hyperlinks on mine. Like I went through it.
Well, the hyperlink is being made right here.
No,
And make sure you do that. Make sure you put the ending tag on the end too. I mean, that should be correct right there. That's what's making the hyperlink is what's in gray right here. Any other questions? I'll leave that up there for a couple minutes. But again, the rest of the period is yours. And I really want, especially anyone, I think pretty much everybody is all caught up in here now. All right? And if you did do a makeup on the test, I've graded the makeups. It should be, if you go to your page on your grades, the makeup should be on there. All right? Remember, you could only get half the points back. So if for some reason you did very poorly, let's say you did the second one that was worth, 63 points? Let's just say you got 13 on it. Okay, so you missed 50 points. That would mean that the most you could get if it worked would be 25. All right? Everybody have this who wants it? I'll leave it up there, like I said, I'll leave it up, it's 8:34, I'll leave it up there till about 8:40. But I'm done lecturing. And that was at the top, so if you missed that. I know I often say this, but you might want to, before the lecture on, I think it's Thursday, on Chapter 7, you might want to read the chapter because it's quite different from the other stuff we've been doing. No, I'm saying Thursday when we go over Chapter 7, it's object-oriented JavaScript. It looks different, it acts different than the stuff we've been doing so far. Some of it's similar because we've been actually using some of it with like document dot or window dot, but some of it's going to be different. It's the bottom. Yeah, I'll leave it up there for a couple minutes, but I'm gonna stop with the tape.